So the concept, all things work together for good for those who love God, comes into play when you weave together different religions or philosophies and some of the science. We're going to do a little teaching on that and pulling together some teachings of Jesus with the wisdom of the Tao Te Ching. And we're going to start with, again, a basic concept that takes a little bit of a leap of faith. For most people, it's an easy one. You are a soul. Now, I drew it as a blob. Don't know how else to draw it. Visualize it however you want. You're a soul that has a body. This body is really the ego in all its forms in many different ways, and our obsession with this causes all our pain and our suffering. These two things work together dualistically. You're a soul and you're a body at the same time, and they work together in a way that I want you to conceptually think of it as a vessel of some sort. Now in science, in the book New Eyes, we talk about how atoms are vessels of light. This body, very specifically, is made up of atoms that absorb energy and release energy. They absorb energy and hold on to it, and they release energy, okay? What else does that? Cups, very simply. Or a bottle. Has liquid in it, I could pour it out, I can add liquid to it, okay? This dynamic, what's really happening is we are vessels. These bodies that we have here are vessels of light. They carry around energy. We know this when it comes to our emotional states. And we can feel it all the time, the type of energy that's inside of us. And many of all the spiritual teachings are really oriented towards this thing called the vessel. Now, a teaching that links directly to this, Luke 22:42, Jesus is the night before he gets crucified. Jesus is struggling with what he has to do. And he says the words, Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. Right? This cup, what, was he holding a mug of some sort or something? No, metaphorically again, he knows he's a vessel of light as well. And what was his vessel supposed to be doing? What actually was he in the middle of? This was a man/son of God that was getting filled with the light so much that he needed to offer it back to the people for all time. He knew this was his process. And he knew he was a vessel. And this was a difficult thing for him to do, to get filled with the light and be so filled with the light that he gave it out to everybody for all time. And he knew he had to do this. And so he says, God, could you take this from me? This is too much, this vessel. Being filled with this type of energy was pretty overwhelming for him. Okay? That's Luke 22:42. Well, how was he different than us? In some ways, as a enlightened being that he was, best way to think of it, he just was a more open, bigger vessel. Okay? And I just have a couple little drawings here. Smaller vessels, bigger vessels. Well, what Jesus was being was this big vessel filled with the light. And that requires a lot of work and a lot of focus to be able to pull off being this type of light. That's why he was struggling with it. To those who much has been given, much is expected. He knew he had to stay supremely focused, and he knew what he needed to do, go to the cross, eliminate the addiction to the ego self. He knew he needed to do that, and he needed to teach us that. And so he's this big vessel, and most of us along the way are these smaller type vessels, okay? And so our expectations aren't quite the same as what he had to do. Ultimately, we have to do what he had to do, which is to defeat the ego within. But we're in different phases. Well, he got to this phase where he was at this level. Psalm 23, the fear no evil passage, a verse from the Bible, in it says, my cup overflows. Now we're back to a cup again. Well, your cup overflows. Well, how does your cup overflow? Well, how does any bottle overflow? You put a whole lot of liquid in it, it's going to overflow. Well, what happens if you take this body, which is specifically here to serve the soul, what happens when you fill it with so much light? What's going to happen? It's going to overflow, okay? The process, ultimately, of a spiritual being is to come here, get rid of the negative energies, get filled with the type of light that's known as spirit, and then you overflow. Now, let me read to you from the Tao, verse 77. The one who has the Tao offers his surplus to others. What man has more than enough and gives it to the world? Only the man of the Tao. The master can keep giving because there is no end to his wealth. He acts without expectation, he succeeds without taking credit, and he does not think that he is better than anyone else. So here's the Tao, perfectly describing exactly what Jesus was doing. right? What was he doing? What's the Tao? Really, the Tao is the Holy Spirit. It's the same thing. It's the life-giving force. And one who taps into the Tao, the one who's the master of the Tao, has a surplus because he gets filled with the light. And he's so filled, what does he do? He offers it to others. And what man has more than enough that can give it to the world? Only this man who has the Tao. So it's not about money and stuff and fame and fortune and likes on Facebook and all that stuff. It's about having the Spirit inside of you, overflowing it, and then giving it out to others. In this process, there's no end to it. It's bottomless. You're constantly being fed by it. Once you get into this way of being and this overflowing starts to happen, you're constantly going to be filled as well. It takes a lot of work to get there because you have to eliminate the idea of the false self. You have to eliminate the ego and all the physical trappings that keep us stuck. Then we overflow in such a way that you're constantly giving it out to others. There is no end to your wealth. And this person acts without expectation because he freely gives. It's exactly like how the sun operates. Every day the sun gets up and it shines on us. And it gives to you freely, doesn't it? And it doesn't judge you at all. It shines on roses and poison ivy alike. And sinners and not sinners, it shines on Christians and Muslims and Jews and atheists, and everybody in the world gets access to the sun. And it does so without judgment. Perfect representation to what the Holy Spirit's doing. Constantly offering itself to you. This is grace. What's your one job? Receive it. That's it. And then if you receive it, you get filled with it such that it overflows. And you act without expectation. Now you're not doing this to others with expecting interest, as Jesus would say. You don't give the light to others and expect something back. You also don't need anything back from them because you know you're a constant source of it yourself. And so you just give it to others. You shine the light. You're graceful, you're merciful, you're just doing this for other people. And you don't have any expectation. And you also don't take credit for it. This is supremely important. The person that's filled with this kind of light acts in accordance with the light. And it doesn't say, I have done something, right? Like Jesus says, I just listen to the will of my Father. What does he say at the end of Luke 22:42? Not my will be done, thy will. He knew he needed to listen to this. He knew he needed to do that. And so do we. And if you listen to it, all of a sudden you don't need to take credit for anything anymore. If you did something great, you are the appreciation of that. You're the experience of that. If something moved through you, whether it's an act of charity or a beautiful piece of art, and if it's a musical piece you composed or a good relationship or whatever, it's the Holy Spirit that did that through you, and you give it credit, right? The ego wants to take credit, say, I did this. And the opposite is when you're not filled with the light and you do quote-unquote bad things. Why does Jesus say, forgive them, they know not what they do? Because it's the absence of the light that's getting you to, making you do all that. The whole thing is getting credit to this thing, the vessel, or the Tao. And you don't need to take credit. You're not going to brag, but you also don't need to beat yourself up over it either. Because this person ultimately does not think he's better than anyone else. The only thing that this person did is said, more light please, which is logical. It's why Muhammad says truth stands out clear from error, therefore no compulsion in religion. It's logical after a while. More light please. Seek and you will find, ask and you will receive. It's not talking about big bags of gold. Ask for more light, get more light. Now, how do we do this? How do we stay focused enough to get more light? I have this silly little drawing here. It's a game that we can often play at amusement parks. I cannot draw very well, so I did not draw horses. So I drew little people, but that works for our example. If you go to an amusement park, they often have a game where they've got water guns and little horses and little holes. If you squirt the water into the hole, what happens? The horsey moves along, right? And so if this is hole number 1 and I hit this little horsey moves along. And if this is hole number 2 and I hit this with the water, this little horsey moves along. What happens if I hit a steady stream of water in horse number 3? What happens? It just keeps galloping along, right? What happens when I miss the target? It stops. Now, if you've got 5 kids lined up playing this game and one of them is distracted, let's say number 4 here is distracted, and he keeps squirting his water all over here, his horsey's not going to move, right? And it's never going to move. But if horse number 5, this guy, he keeps nailing his little hole with water, he's going to gallop along so fast and he's going to win the race, okay? To miss this hole is really what sinning is. It literally means to miss the mark. When you don't hit that little hole with the water gun, you're missing the mark. Your little guy's not going to advance. Spiritually, it's just like that. Day after day after day, or a week or month after year, we end up missing the mark because we're not shooting the vessel with the Holy Spirit. We're not hitting the mark. And we know this is happening to us ultimately based upon the way we feel. If we're not advancing and we get stuck right here, we plateau at some point, man, we must be missing the mark somehow. Sinners, us all. We do this, right? Now, to hit the mark is to constantly keep filling this vessel with light. The singular thing you're supposed to be doing as a human/spiritual being. If your eye is single, your whole body will be filled with light. Matthew 5:37. All you do is say yes or no, any more comes from evil. All you do is hit yourself with the Holy Spirit or you don't. That's it. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Everything else is just going along for the ride. You'll be better at everything that you do if you get hit with the Holy Spirit, right? You'll be calmer, more peaceful, more artistic, more creative, more forgiving, kind, compassion, all of that. As long as you're hitting this mark. So, I've got 2 quick ways to think about how do we stay focused. One is the most simple thing ever, except for we're really, really bad at it. Focus on your breathing. And if you can stay focused, it leads to things like mindfulness and awareness. And so you can stay focused on what it is that you need to do. How do I keep accessing the Holy Spirit? Practice breath work. Stay calm, cool, and collected, and focus on it. The mind benefits greatly when we do this by practicing breath work. And you're breathing all day long. And if you get so good at it, you can stay focused on good breathing all day long, you'll constantly keep hitting this mark all day long. This is why in Matthew 5:48, Jesus says, be perfect. All he's saying is keep hitting the mark, right? Keep adding spirit to each moment. And the last concept can be hard to do, but it's pretty simple. It's just through the virtues. People have heard the expression, does everything happen for a reason, right? And the answer is definitely yes. It's just not physical reasons. Nothing ever happened so you could get a job or meet the new, girlfriend or to hit the lottery or whatever. That's not God's interest. As Jesus says, don't be focused on the affairs of man. Let's be focused on the affairs of God. Things happen to teach you virtues, ultimately. Things happen to show you patience. Things happen to show you forgiveness. Things happen to show you courage and hope and wisdom and mercy and all of that. Physical things are happening to show you spiritual things so you can learn how to access the light. And so virtues, if you stay focused on them throughout the course of the day, you ask yourself, why are all these cars in my way? I'm in such a hurry. I need to get there. I have this negative feeling. Well, that negative feeling, darkness, you ain't hitting the light, right? What is that negative feeling teaching you in that moment? Oh yeah, hit the spiritual virtue known as patience. You practice patience in that moment. Now you're hitting it. Now you're going to get filled with the light. How do you feel in traffic? Better. Logical, right? Remember Muhammad, truth stands out clear from error. That's obvious. Patience trumps impatience. And then you got the annoying neighbor or any type of relationship that's stressing you out. And you're all flustered. Man, if I could just get that person to change, I'd feel better. You're missing the mark. That's not what you're here to do. You weren't here to fix other people. You're here to get filled with the light, period. So that your cup overflows. It's why you don't have to fear any evil. You will do this, as the whole psalm says. You're going to be forced to lie down in green pastures and beside still waters. And you're being made to sit in the presence of your enemies. It's going to happen, okay? Your job is to get filled with the light. Well, as soon as you start thinking, I'm going to fix that other person, you're now missing the mark. But if you say, all right, what this situation is showing me is tolerance and forgiveness and mercy, now you're hitting the mark again. Now you'll get filled with the light. You benefit because you're going to feel better. And how will you be in relation to that other person? Healthier. You'll know what to do. You'll see it clearly. You also know that the other person is doing this game as well. Maybe not very well, but you know that every one of us is doing this vessel game. And so when you stay focused on the virtues, you give yourself an opportunity throughout the course of the day to evaluate yourself and say, what do I need here? Patience? Yeah, let's work on that. What do I need here? Forgiveness? Let's work on that. Mercy? Let's work on that. Do this while breathing. Intensifies it wonderfully. You'll stay nice, calm, cool, and collected. And then you do this wonderful thing that gets misunderstood a lot. Ask, and you will receive. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door shall be opened. The fact is, that verse isn't talking about big bags of gold. It's not about the new car or winning the Super Bowl. People ask for that all the time. Remember, that's focused on the affairs of man. You want the Spirit? Focus on the Spirit. Ask for more patience, right? Ask for forgiveness. Ask for mercy and hope and wisdom. Ask for clarity. Go looking for unity. Instead of arguing why your prophet's better than somebody else's, go look to see why Paul would say all things work together for good for those who love God. Because it all works together for good for those who love God. We're all part of this puzzle together. And if you ask for that, that comes to you. And that's hitting the mark, that's getting filled with the light. As you do so, this vessel overflows. And then you can't help but offer it to others. This is why Jesus says, you are the light of the world. You don't hide this light. You put it on a mountaintop and you let it shine for all to see. You don't hide it. You want other people to see it, right? This is your process. This is my process. This is everybody's in the world processes. Stay focused. Get filled with the light.